would like you guys, if you would please, to, starting with Marty, state your name, like role, whatever you want to tell us about
Okay.
yourself in terms of description of who is Marty.
Okay, I'm Martin O'Connell. I am the chair of the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department at the University of New Orleans, and I am a fish ecologist.
Alrighty, and
I'm Mag O'Connell, and I'm a researcher at the Pontchartrain Institute for Environmental Sciences, and I study fish as well.
so dare I ask how the two of you got together?
We met at Virginia Tech, and I'm from New York, and there was this young lady who didn't have an accent and drank like a fish, and it's like, this is going to happen. Because I thought the New Orleans accent sounded like a New York accent.
There you go. And what part of New York are you from?
Mostly from Albany, upstate, but we lived in Queens for a while.
And
I'm from here. I'm from New Orleans.
so your how many generations back?
I'd say, the grandparents came over, but they're from other parts of Louisiana, so we've been here for a while.
So, as I mentioned, I am trying to capture people's stories who were here in New Orleans before Katrina and had the ability to decide to come back and have stayed since Katrina. So, if you would just give me a little bit of the pre-Katrina, like what was your life like here pre-Katrina, and why were you here in New Orleans pre-Katrina?
You want me to go?
Sure.
So I was here as a member of the Pontchartrain Institute. I started as a postdoc, and they hired me as a researcher. And Meg was working with me because we all had a background, helped with the stats. And it was working on campus, doing research, going out on Lake Pontchartrain and sampling the fishes and getting paid to do that. And we had a lot of projects going on. We lived 2 blocks south of the university, could walk to work, do all sorts of stuff, have a little yard and have a garden and a barbecue in the back. And, there's just no kids, just humming along, doing our work. And, it was a nice life.
So tell me a little bit about the Pontchartrain Institute.
Pontchartrain Institute is a collection of researchers at the University of New Orleans who study problems of coastal issues in Louisiana, which we have a lot of. So we have people who study the barrier islands, the erosion there, people who study the hydrology, people like Meg and myself who study fishes, people who work with education, trying to get people to realize problems like Katrina were because we had lost so much land to the coast. So we work together to do this research in the hopes that we can come up with a solution someday. It's just very hard with all the cuts to higher education in Louisiana to keep doing what we do.
Mm-hmm. And so Meg, your family is here, so
Right. So I went away to graduate school and I met him, and then we've gradually migrated back here. He had the opportunity to work with the person I worked with at UNO, and I think we both liked it. He likes music. We like going out and doing things. We didn't have children at the time, and it was good being back around my family, and it's a fun city, so we liked it. And family roots, and a lot of people from New Orleans, you don't really migrate too far away before you want to come back.
So when you say it's a fun city, I mean, we all see the Bourbon Street shots. How often are you down in the French Quarter?
No.
We used to go back a lot. Now you have to pay for parking. There's not as many parking spots. But we used to go and just hang out. But I think some of the things that we define as fun is, there's just always something going on. It could be neighborhood bars. It could be going neighborhood parades, city park. We're really close to a really nice park, and just the vibe. I think it's just what I grew up with. It isn't all just going downtown, but it's Mardi Gras, family things, and dressing up in costumes, and it's fun. It's family stuff, and it's fun.
So you were here how long before Katrina hit then?
We got here in 2000, so
Back in 2000,
So
right?
5
5
years.
years.
5 years.
Yes.
All right, so they say, let me back up a minute. When you hear there's a hurricane in the Gulf, so, especially a native New Orleanian,
Right.
and then have been hanging out with them for quite some time, what do you do when you hear that?
I'll go. It's changed since they put up the flood protection. And of course, because we're in the Institute, we know the people who work with the flood protection and what's going on. The last few hurricanes, we really didn't have a lot of trouble. We lost energy and things like that. But the people outside the levee system, it was almost as bad as Katrina again. And people don't realize that because most of the people are in New Orleans or Metairie and Kenner. So when we hear hurricanes coming now, we have two choices. We can take off, or we can stay here, and they say, what do they call it? Something in place.
Bunker.
Stay in place. So we have a generator which Jody has to fix for us, and we put if we judge, we make a judgment call. If it's huge, we would probably go. If it's 3 or lower, we get the generator working, we get provisions going, we put the shutters up, and we just sit it out, because now our new house is elevated 10 feet. We're not going to lose everything again. So that's the decision. If it's going to be a monster, yeah, we might go, but last few times we've stayed.
So pre-Katrina, what was the hurricane plan? Was it any different?
My family lived here, and if my dad were still alive, I think it would have been difficult to get him to leave for Katrina, because we never left. We never had anything huge. I was born in '69, so there was Camille, I guess. So I didn't live through anything like that, and since then they didn't have anything like that. So it was always just like, oh, we're going to be out of school for a day, and how long's the power going to be out? So that was the thing. So then I guess a couple of hurricanes before Katrina, it started.
Yeah.
You know, when they were saying this is really bad, and it's something that the tone was just totally different than what it's ever been. Then there was one we had evacuated for before Katrina.
And I always say, I think, was it Isaac or Ivan, the one before Katrina? I think that saved people's lives, because all of a sudden people were leaving, and there was traffic and craziness going on, and people running into each other, and we experienced that going up towards Baton Rouge. And they came up with the contraflow and some other things. So if that hurricane had happened, there was such a screw up. Mm-hmm. I think there would have been more people dying in Katrina, because they had it all in place by the time Katrina came, and we took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. So if you wouldn't mind, explain a little bit more about this flood protection system that's now up and operating. And
okay.
This is something that I think you guys are uniquely situated to describe to us, because very few people are that close to
mm-hmm.
what is happening and what is being planned. And there's all kinds of stuff that I've seen in the newspapers and on the media, and you know, you don't know what to believe. So
right.
If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes and describing it.
I wish I had a map, but that's okay. I'll choreograph it. To the east of us this is Lake Pontchartrain. The next lake down, and they're not really lakes, they're embayments, is a place called Lake Bourne. And that water connects to Mississippi Sound and the open Gulf of Mexico. Back in the 60s, in a move to supposedly increase the economy of the port of New Orleans, they dug what's known as the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet. And it basically it would make ships that would have to avoid the Mississippi River, because that's dangerous and long. They can come right up through St. Bernard Parish and go right into the Inner Harbor Navigational Canal, which opens up right over here near the airport. Even back in the 60s, the ecologist said, if you do this, you're going to let salt water in, it's going to cause a lot of trouble. And they still went ahead and did that. So they did that, and almost immediately the marsh started to erode away. The salt water started killing the freshwater marshes. This is all to the east of us now. So more and more water was coming in time and time again. When Katrina came along, and if you had the maps, there are levees there, and they call it the funnel, right at the western edge of Lake Bourne. That surge came all the way up. If you can picture a funnel, and the water had no place to go, so it got higher and higher, went up the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, came through the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal, through another connection, and came plowing into Lake Pontchartrain. So if that wasn't there, we would still be in our original house. That was the thing that broke it, and the fact that the flood walls weren't constructed correctly. So you had a lot of water coming into Lake Pontchartrain artificially through an artificial connection, and it came up to these canals, like London Avenue Canal right over here, and it was just too much for these faulty flood walls. So what they've done since that time is they basically put one of the largest structures in the world, concrete structures, at the western edge of Lake Bourne at the end of the funnel. And they've done that. They put other floodgates. You see the construction over here. They are now putting the pump stations at the mouth of the lake in Orleans Parish. Before Katrina, all the pump stations were down in the neighborhood south of us, because the people from the nice neighborhoods didn't want to have a pump station in their backyard. So if those pump stations were on the lake, like they are in Metairie and Kenner, we would not have flooded either. So Army Corps has put this big barricade up at the western end of the funnel. They've also actually cut off the Mississippi River Gulf outlet because they realized after 40, 50 years it was an economic failure. It's caused hurricane flooding. It's caused marsh degradation. It caused a dead zone in the southeast portion of Lake Pontchartrain because it killed all the rankia clams. So it took people dying and a city flooding to close off this, what was predicted from the start to be an environmental disaster.
Oh my God. So, how many flood water stations are there?
I think there's 3. London Avenue Canal, next one's Orleans, and the next one's 17th
17th
Street.
Street Canal, right.
Okay. So what about east of us, where most of the damage actually ended up happening?
There are pump stations. Actually, there's one pump station to east of us that's right on Hain Boulevard, so that's probably doing what it needs to do. You have the Inner Harbor Navigational Canal. They've constructed a huge floodgate there. So if a hurricane does come again, even though it's not going to get past the big Great Barrier, it's also, we have a means of shutting things off here for the first time too. So it sounds bizarre, but if a Hurricane Katrina came again, I would bet that we're not going to flood, honestly. Now, people outside that system, that's another issue.
So is St. Bernard Parish outside that system?
Most of it, yeah.
The Ninth Ward would be in it, though.
Portions of it, yes.
I'm curious because when we came before, Liz gave us a tour, of the devastation tour, and they have rebuilt, the Brad Pitt houses down there, and then there's some other really nice homes being constructed. So, one of my first questions was who bought this land and who's building on it, and are these the same people who used to live on it? Still don't know the answer to that. But then also, this completely flooded, like this was the major devastation. So it's kind of, are people buying up that property?
I don't know about the Ninth Ward. I mean, I know there are people who aren't originally from here moving into the upper Ninth Ward, and they call it the Bywater and the Marigny, and they think they're in a wonderland, and then their house gets broken into, and they're living in a la la land, thinking that it's oh, this is going to be great. We're going to be on the edge. We're going to save the city. It's like, okay, good luck with that.
So these are folks who came way after the devastation?
Yeah, I'm glad they're here. Young professionals, you see them on Bayou St. John with their paddle boards and stuff like that. And my students come here. I have people who said they came to help rebuild after Katrina, and they said they wanted to stay, and they went back to school at UNO, which we need all the students we can get. So it's there are people like that, but they don't, like you're saying, who would be moved someplace that's flooded. And they say the same thing to us, but we elevate it, so we feel a lot safer now. So I wouldn't be reluctant. If I was worried about flooding, I wouldn't mind going to not the Ninth Ward maybe, but maybe someplace in Chalmette, a neighborhood down there, Araby or something like that. I wouldn't be as worried as it was before Katrina, because we've stopped that major conduit by having that Mr. Go closed.
Just gonna let
The
this
plane.
get the hell out of here.
Yeah,
You can take the next one.
Okay.
Maybe we could take that line back again, just because the plane was trying.
Okay.
It was just blocking out what you were saying a
I
bit.
don't know, but all right. I forget the question. Go ahead.
So questions about the people who have moved back,
Mhm.
and then you said that you start talking about as far as if you were to buy property.
If I was let's say I'm a young lawyer from California or New York who moved to New Orleans to rebuild, and then say I really liked it here and I wanted to buy a cheap house, I would probably, maybe not the Ninth Ward or the lower Ninth Ward, but I would check in St. Bernard Parish, Araby, someplace like that. There are nice little neighborhoods there that have been rebuilt, and yeah, I'd feel perfectly comfortable doing that. You'd still have to do the same hurricane preparation. Hopefully your house is elevated. If not, you'd have to evacuate. But I think everyone needs to realize that. And I think New Orleanians in the past, I teach about this in my class, there's always going to be Mississippi River floods, and there are always going to be hurricanes. And the city's rebounded. And if you look at all the old houses, like the sliver by the river, the people elevated their houses back in the 1700s and 1800s because they knew it was going to flood. And it's that realization that you can't just build slab homes like California and say, I couldn't believe we weren't supposed to flood. Well, look, but it's going to happen. So that's the realization if you're going to leave it. If you can face that and get used to either evacuating or what do they call it, staying in place?
bunker.
No, there's
I'm
something
not
else
sure
going
what
on.
it is.
So it's, in other words, staying in place and riding out hurricanes and riding out the loss of electricity. You'll be fine.
They do have to coordinate now that, there are these structures at the mouths of the canals. They do have to coordinate. Water gets into those canals and they have to pump it to the lake. So there's a pumping system into the canal and then pumping out into the lake. And if those are sometime, there has been issues where why aren't the pumps on or what's going on? So that's an issue, but I don't think it's the same as a surge of water coming in. And the problem with the Ninth Ward was that canal is so big. When it broke, it was a lot of water. It wasn't as, a smaller canal, you have water coming in, but it wasn't like this size of canal. It was the smaller size. So I think, you have to consider that. And sometimes when we've stayed during a hurricane, we see the water rising in the streets, and then all of a sudden you can tell the pumps are working, or they're keeping up with the water enough. You can tell it's sucked away quick enough. So, and then when you can tell when it isn't on either. So there is that issue, but I think it's totally different than a surge of water coming up a canal that has nothing at its mouth, and it's just going to break that faulty wall. You can see it's more like water sloshing over the top versus breaking through. So
tell me a little bit. You guys had a home here before Katrina,
Mhm.
and then you had to leave for Katrina.
Right.
And you did leave.
we did leave, yes.
And where'd you go?
We went, we actually kind of didn't really know where we were going, and then my sister's in-laws had a camp in
Brookhaven.
Mississippi. So we went up there, and Brookhaven did have some wind damage, a lot of wind damage.
And we lost power.
We lost power, and that town was without power for several days. So we were evacuated in a nice little cabin that had pretty much nothing, electricity-wise or even water.
We had
so
to
we had
bathe
to go,
in the stream. It was very
a lot of
grapes of wrath.
Grapes of Wrath. There was also, thankfully, a Kmart or a Walmart there where we
Eventually we
bought
got out.
clothes and had stuff we could eat that didn't need to be refrigerated, and we had lots of bottled water, and we were just listening on our handheld cranked radio, what was going on. So I think the night before we had TV on, and I forgot when. I think it was in the radio when we realized they were talking about water coming in. And then somehow I got a hold of one of my siblings, and when they were talking about water and they were describing the neighborhoods, I realized it was right around our canal, and then we kind of got the idea of, oh wait, that's our neighborhood.
And where was your neighborhood? It is again.
Right off of London Avenue Canal.
Just 2 blocks south of UNO.
2 blocks south.
And about, 3 blocks from the canal break?
Right.
You can actually see them working on the break right now. The Army Corps is out there working on the...
There was a break on both sides of that canal. On the east side, our side, it was lower than it was south of us, and then on the other side, it's pretty much in line with our house. It was on the other side of the canal. There was a break there. So we realized, we were thinking, okay, well, maybe it just got the other side of the canal, and then I think some reporter was flying over his own house and was describing the street names, and we realized it was our
There was a sense of disbelief until we went to that Chinese restaurant in Brookhaven.
When we actually
and you
saw
actually
it on
saw
TV.
our neighborhood, and you can see,
Finally saw
you all
TV.
think, oh, maybe we were on a little ridge or something, or maybe a big magical bubble was around the house, but then you see it, and we're just sitting in a Chinese restaurant realizing, man, we just lost everything. Everything.
Yeah.
What did you take with you when you went?
We did bring most of our photo albums. We had our wedding pictures. We had all of our paperwork where we were immediately looking up our homeowners and flood insurance policies to see what we had. And a little bit of clothing. I think I forgot all my medicines, and I have allergies, so that was...
Couldn't take any of my instruments. I remember tucking my Fender bass in the spare room underneath the comforter, thinking, well, if someone's going to loot the house, maybe they won't look under the comforter. And then all my instruments, all my amps just gone.
Yeah. I think we put things up, tried to prop things on top of furniture, thinking, well, if it flooded, it,
A couple of feet.
Right, that would save stuff. So, yeah, that was fun.
So you're watching TV, eating Chinese food, realizing you just lost everything.
Yeah, I think that was the first time we could see a television, and we just looked and saw the extent of the flooding over the whole city, and we were just starving for real food, but then just not really that hungry. Just all of a sudden lost our appetites looking at. I mean, we knew what was going on, but you didn't really know what it looked like until you had a view of them panning over the city.
So, and then you decided to do what?
And then it was another a la the Jodes. It's like, well, we can stay in Brookhaven, or my mom lives in Daytona, and we had our last little blue car with everything we own in it, and there were lines for gas, and people forget that there were shortages in Mississippi, and where we went in Brookhaven, we used to do field work up there, and we knew all the back roads and all that because we worked in southern Mississippi, and we had to decide, can we make it to Florida, or are we going to run out of gas? And we stood in lines for half a day in Brookhaven, and then the brake fluid was going out, and we had to replace that, and we were like, oh, we're never going to get out of Mississippi. And we finally, through the back roads of South Mississippi, South Alabama, because we've been over there too, found gas stations.
Yeah, finally when we got in Alabama, all of a sudden the lines went down, and we were like, oh, good, we don't have to worry about rationing the gas or if we're going to make it. So we're home free, I guess, at that point.
And went to Florida, stayed there how long?
A month.
A month.
And the Floridians, everyone else was stunned, but the Floridians were sympathetic because they'd been through stuff like that. They can understand.
Right. They were they gave us free internet. I mean, we would go somewhere, and we were immediately tried to contact our work at UNO, and we just try to gather people's, regular emails. The server, they didn't have access to the server, so we didn't have our UNO emails, but we were gathering up our emails and I think just trying to reconnoiter. I was talking to my other sibling, Liz, was the only one of the five of us who lost her house, and so we were just sort of talking about, well, what are we going to do? And I was like, well, look at the houses in Uptown. They're elevated. If we had been elevated, would be okay. We can elevate, and then it wasn't clear if we were what we were thinking we could do, elevating, if we were allowed to do that. If the insurance would pay for it. If the insurance would pay for it, or if they were going to just not let us rebuild, or things like that. But I was thinking, well, our university's okay. It's not open. It's sort of on a high ground, and we probably still have jobs.
Yeah.
And you could tell the university was rallying and trying to they were going to try to have that semester open, and the administrators were crowded into one room up at LSU's campus.
Good old LSU only gave us one room out of the whole campus to function, and all our administrators were stuck in one room.
But they were really rallying everybody and the students to see who wanted to still take classes or who could teach online and how to teach online. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a new thing.
So I ended up teaching, I think, a couple of classes from my mother-in-law's porch using illegal Wi-Fi to connect to the students and just sending them material and grading their material.
So how long did it take to work through figuring out whether or not you could do anything with your house, and then the whole elevation piece? Talk with us a little bit about what all was involved in doing that.
Well, we got, I think when we realized we put in for a trailer to live in, and my sister and I got 2 trailers to be put on my mom's property, FEMA trailers at my mom's property, uptown, which was dry. And
so when you say uptown,
right along the river, so right near Audubon Park and Henry Clay.
Your children's hospital.
Yeah. So I think we just, first of all, was being able to get back home, and I think we were living at my mom's house where the water was still, you had to boil the water and things like that. It was just Marty and me.
And that was a month later?
I think it was a month later, and I think we just realized we needed to come back to just kind of reconnoiter and get our act together about what we were going to do. And then I think we just started looking, people were talking about going downtown and having your houses assessed, and we realized, if we want to elevate it, we just started reading up on what, it was not clear. It's not clear with your insurance. Now it's probably more clear, but at the time, even if you called your insurance policy, your insurance company, I don't think they really knew what to do, and we were probably one of the first groups of people to do that. So my sister and I would just kind of figure out and go downtown and for various steps of the permitting, just do what we needed to do to say, we want to, this is the percent damage in our house, we want to elevate. And
who did you talk to?
The permitting people that, I forgot what, is it
building?
Yeah, the building, the code enforcement.
And was it pretty straightforward?
No, it wasn't. But I think once we figured out, you had to do certain steps like, I need to first demolish my house. So what wording do we have to do to just say, you tell me I have permission to demolish my house, so the insurance company will pay for the demolition. We knew we had that extra bit of I don't know what you call it, elevation insurance. Everyone was required, to have flood insurance, and you get that extra bit of money that'll help you demolish and start to rebuild or get to a certain elevation and mitigate. So we just started kind of winging it, and once we got the wording right, we would write it down and send it to our neighbors, and we started all the neighbors would start civic improvement associations and just start writing to each other and sending information back and forth.
So you sort of formed a network.
Yeah.
This is how you get this done.
Right. This is how you get this, just to get your house demolished, and then, just to figure out from there what you should be doing. So we both figured, why don't we just get the house elevated? And I think there was one or two companies that were established before Katrina, well established, and then maybe one other company. And so we were just we got onto these guys' list of getting a foundation for the. Well, the thing was, we thought we could elevate our original house, and my sister is a frame house. She thought she could do hers. Hers was fine. Hers is a wooden house. Well, at some point in the process, they realized ours is a type of slab house that's not easily elevated without something potentially going wrong with it. So at that point, my sister and our paths just went in opposite directions, which was devastating. But we figured out, with our finances, what we needed to do. Liz figured out what she needed to do to get that original house elevated, and then we figured out.
Is that worth the story?
Well, it is kind of a story, but the company that was going to elevate our house saw how devastated we were, and they actually built houses. So we worked out some kind of deal to actually buy a house from them, that they would bring an entire house in and replace our original house.
It wasn't all benevolent.
It
though.
wasn't.
They
it was a good advertisement for them.
They used that and was on Hauling House, and they used the whole show, and they still use it as an advertisement for their abilities to move homes. So it wasn't like
right, but they, it was one of the few that knew how to move houses and elevate houses. So while my sister, she got the permission to do whatever, and I thought we would salvage our house initially, but we went a separate path, and they actually brought a house in and then elevated that up. And so in our neighborhood, we weren't the very first ones, but my sister's block had one of the first elevated houses, same company, and it was nice that we all got to know this company, and they were reputable, and they started the path. When other people figured out how they did it, they'd send them that information. Mm-hmm. So it was very convoluted, because we would take trips, and you never knew when you went to the permitting office if they were going to put that roadblock down, or if they were like, we don't know what you're supposed to be doing.
And it's amazing how old people could even go through what Meg did paperwork-wise. I mean, imagine if you were 60 or 70 years old trying to go and schlep down to City Hall every week. It's just, you had to be persistent, and it's amazing so many people actually came back.
Right, and I think doing it early before they realized, before they got their act together and made it even more tedious. I guess the earlier you do something, you can kind of get away with things. I guess it was quicker, since we did stuff legally, but, we didn't have to worry about all the secondary, paperwork that was put in afterwards,
So how long did it take, time-wise, from when you got back a month later to when you were able to actually take residence in?
It was fall of 2006.
Fall 2006?
Yeah. So the house came in it was really, really quick, I would say, mostly compared to other people. The house probably came in during the summer of 2006, and then by somehow getting permission to get the electricity turned on was a big thing. The house was complete, but we had to go through is it livable? Do you have all your permits and all that? A few months later, they put that electricity on, and we just never. We didn't even have furniture. We just never looked back.
Yeah, you're thinking we're just gonna see what it's like with electricity now. We're staying here tonight. I don't care if the FEMA trailer all over.
We have one mattress
here
on the floor. That's our bedroom now.
So you moved back in 2006. Now I visited in 2007.
Right.
You come to our house?
I didn't come to your house. I was at Liz and Jody's for a while. How many people were in your neighborhood?
Not a lot. We had one neighbor and her husband living in a trailer, which was sort of odd because it was really so not populated, unpopulated. It was kind of scary just living in something like a trailer. Not many. I mean, we were the only people on the block. Gradually it filled in, but you got to the point where if you saw a car on your street, every car on your street, you were wondering who this was, because if they weren't living there, they shouldn't be in the neighborhood. So it was kind of weird. It was dark.
Yeah, no street lights.
It was quiet. So.
Yeah, I drove through Gentilly
Mm-hmm.
at night.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was strange. But I think like just having some people come back and seeing that, oh, you can do this, and then some people built as is on the ground, that just kind of triggers other people thinking they can do it as well. Now, we were lucky with our insurance and I guess our finances and stuff to do this, but other people didn't get half of what they should have gotten. Too much of an argument about how much insurance money or mitigation money or whatever other money they needed. And I mean, maybe now they're trying to make good on some of that, but I think a lot of people just gave up on it. So even if they had wanted to come back, they just didn't have that option. So we did lose a lot of neighbors. We also had a lot of elderly, and maybe most of them made it as far as not, drowning or anything during Katrina. They got out, but for their families to have their elderly people want to rebuild and go through all of that, even if they were just rebuilding as is, I think they just figured this is, my 80-year-old relative who's been living here forever. It's too much to go through it at that age. So a lot of elderly people moved away. So, and that was
and that affected
lot.
the neighborhood.
Yeah,
People, not to sound corny, but having retired people, original homeowners in the neighborhood, they keep an eye on things at work, and we completely lost. I never thought of that as being an important part of a neighborhood, but when those people left, we lost a lot of security. And you can see stuff like that in the what happened in Japan, the same type of stuff, neighborhoods coming back. And once those old people are gone, you've lost an important, significant element of your neighborhood.
Yeah, our neighborhood was a post-World War II type development, so a lot of the people living there were the original homeowners, and either there were generations of their families lived there or they were still there. So you did lose that element of so-and-so's been living here for 50, 60 years, and then all of a sudden that whole generation left. So it's tough.
So now, you both have jobs?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your life like now in New Orleans? What is New Orleans now? Has it changed? You just mentioned the composition of the neighborhood is changed in some elements. What about your daily lives post-Katrina now? We're almost 10 years out.
Mm-hmm.
Is New Orleans back to what you thought it was before? What are your thoughts about it?
I think we have a child now, and so he was born in 2007 or 2008. Sorry, sorry, Patrick. But we had to go through the whole thing about where we're going to put our child in school, and they had a few good public schools out there. But now I really think that this generation of our child, his cohort, they didn't have to go through Katrina, and the schools, it's been kind of messy, but the schools are really coming along. And I mean, it's instead of just having two good schools to look at, you can look at a whole bunch of good schools, and they're diverse. And that's just, I mean, that's like the best, other than getting back in our house, and him being born. It's just really cool that I feel like kids coming along now and people having children now and looking at school choice, we really have a lot better choice. And these youngsters the teens that are older that went through Katrina and they had all that disruption in their lives, you can tell it's just a different, they got a bad deal, and maybe the high schools are coming along too, but I think the lower grades are just that much better. And so I'm impressed with it. I'm happy. I think the younger kids coming along are having a better opportunities to go to school now. So we're just thrilled that we're active in our kids' public school, and it's close by. It's in the neighboring area that got flooded, mostly not so much elevated houses, not as flooded as we did, but just lots of businesses, lots of people originally from there, and maybe some young people moving in too. businesses and very gung-ho about putting their kids in public school, and I'm happy about that. I mean, I'm really happy.
Yeah, I don't think that school would exist if it wasn't for these
Yeah,
young people
where they
coming
had
in who, for whatever reason, came in after Katrina and just liked it. And they said, well, you don't have a public school in mid-city that's diverse? We got to do something about it. And they went and did something about it.
Right, and I think the schools were flooded, so you couldn't. Some schools, I think, kind of kept their entity and went to temporary places, but some of them just completely shut down. So now you have this sort of like a blank slate of schools coming up, popping up, and it's weird about trying. I mean, we went through 3 years of where's it going to go and how are we going to do this, and then we're going to drive halfway, across town to go here and things like that. But just not having any idea of where it was going to end up at was very
Stressful.
it wasn't like we had to do something. It was just more like the waiting. But we're just thrilled about that. Now, working in our economic environment in Louisiana right now at a state
Yeah, I never thought I'd have to worry
university.
about my job as a tenured professor
But
because some idiots are trying to not put any new taxes out there. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So I'll stop it at that.
yeah.
But the
But I mean,
university has gone through. University went through a lot at Katrina. A lot of faculty got fired. Then we declared exigency, and luckily we survived because we were doing research and bringing in soft money. But it looks like the same thing again with this current state leader. They're gonna come. Katrina, has been smacked down already by Katrina, and now they're just trying to smack us down more and make us, try to wipe us off the face of the earth.
I mean, we're pretty resilient. I think the fact that our university's sort of been secondary as far as resources to the bigger universities, and we managed to get through Katrina pretty well. But this was something sort of Katrina was out of our control, but this is really, really out of our control beyond what we should have to go through. I mean, I'm sure it's going to come back and be the same type of university, same type of people will be attracted to coming to our university and being a professor because they want to live in New Orleans and be a professor in New Orleans. But meanwhile, it's been undermined a lot, so you might not have the original people if they were fired or they just got disgusted with it. So we're doing, I mean, still have attracting students and grant money, maybe not as much state money, but I mean, I think we could persevere. It's just really disgusting and disheartening. So
politics in New Orleans.
I wouldn't say the problem with that is in the New Orleans part. I mean,
there's still houses in our neighborhood that haven't been taken care of.
right.
Right. There's one, Daryl's
yeah.
house was up for 10 years, and there were trees growing through it,
Right.
and the inspectors would show up, and they'd yak your ear
Yeah.
off, but then nothing would ever get done, and it took 10 years to take down a house. There's, what's behind Nicole's house, the forest there? That's 2 houses
Yeah.
down. And
There's
you hear the
right.
mayor talk about it, but he's not doing a whole heck of a lot.
I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's, the lack of, you lost people, you lost tax base. If you have, not as many wealthier people who've left to add to that tax base, we don't have the money to keep the police. Like, our police force is down. The people that you need to come out and change a light bulb in the street, or, pick up the garbage in the park, or mow the lawn in the park, which our neighbor just did yesterday because, we're never going to see that happen. Maybe twice this summer. So there's stuff like that that's really, really, we get on people's cases and you wonder if it's like this elsewhere.
Like some reporter said, why are they putting 50-foot palm trees along canal for the tourists, and some places in Chile don't have sidewalks yet?
Right.
It's things you don't
So, yeah, I
think
guess there
about.
are some
Not having
things in the world.
sidewalks was huge. We were walking to work, and we'd be so happy when there'd be a sidewalk put in, so we wouldn't have to walk in the street. It's just
Yeah. So, I guess there's still some things on the state level and the city level.
So why are you staying here?
this superficial. This sounds superficial. I think it's the food, honestly, because we go places, and I won't name the city, but we went on a train trip last summer, and we said, "Oh, let's still try maybe have good barbecue or something like that." Okay. Well, this is kind of blah, and then it just repeated, except for breakfasts. It's just like, oh man, it was late, it was cold, there's no spices on it. And finally, the last day of the vacation, we actually went to a New Orleans themed restaurant
From
to try to get
displaced
some
New Orleans,
from
New
and
Orleanians who had
wasn't that
left.
good either. So,
It was-
but it sounds silly, but you know, it's not so much the variety, but it's that they care about the food here. And if some restaurant doesn't give you a good meal, you can go a billion other places. So I don't know. It's like one of our times we were displaced. We were coming back through Enterprise, Alabama, and I had to ask for hot sauce in a Mexican restaurant. You know, it's stuff like that, and it sounds silly, but that's my excuse. It's the food. What do you think?
I think that's, and I mean, I guess like creativity in your food, there's just, it's just a creative atmosphere. You can go out and people, it's not just people talking about, I don't know, people just, they seem to be, I don't know what the word is.
Annoyingly slow?
Annoyingly slow, yes. No. I mean, I think just creative. You could go out and see artwork. You could go, you're dressing up in costumes, making fun of what's going on in your city right now, or things like that. I don't know. It's the vibe, I guess, that I grew up with. So that's still here for the large part.
And I married someone from here, so I'm going down with the ship.
Right. So
They always say you marry someone from New Orleans, you're not leaving, because they're not leaving. I mean, all your siblings are still here, right?
yeah. so I know. Sorry.
So I just want to touch back on one more thing, and that was, you said diversity in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Explain what you mean by diversity in the schools.
One of the schools that came back it's in a neighborhood that's pretty diverse as it is, and I think when they had all these planning meetings for schools and stuff, and it seemed like people didn't really have the parents didn't have much of a hand in that, and I think some parents in this neighborhood, mid-city, decided that they were like, we should just do this ourselves, just figure out a way to somehow have control over the process of having a school in our neighborhood. And they have an international baccalaureate school. It's open access, and I think a lot of the good schools before were good because either you lived in an upper class neighborhood or you'd have to test into it or something. There was some kind of selection. There is a selection process at this school where 50% have to come from this neighborhood, but it's a very diverse neighborhood anyway, economically in every way, shape, or form. But 50% of the people can also come from elsewhere. So I think because you have that recipe and instead of just forcing diversity, they kind of wanted it to be that way in the first place. It's sort of like this family. I mean, it really, it's corny, it's cheesy, but it's just this, you go in there and you see every kind of makeup of family you could possibly imagine, and kids who have challenges, and everyone's in the same class together. And this international baccalaureate is, it's basically where diplomats would put their kids into schools, and they wanted to have the same standards as each of those international baccalaureate schools around the world. So they have these core values, and they ingrain that in the kids. It's almost like morals. It's not like religion, but it's really like, we want you to be open-minded and caring and inquisitive and all of this. And they give kids rewards, and that besides trying to do well in school, which they're for as well, they really want the kids to be mature and think and be creative. And so it's like this recipe for this successful school, and it's only been around for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're up to 6th grade, and it's going to be up to 8th grade soon. And I can't say enough about it. I just wish.
And this is at one school, 3 schools?
It's at one school, but there are a few other schools that aren't international baccalaureate, but they are trying to be diverse, like similarly. And I think there are other schools coming up sort of in a similar fashion. Yeah, so, but besides that, then you have the other schools everyone's been trying to get into as well. So the pool of schools are out there, are bigger. The pool is bigger, where your choice is more. So I just like it, so.
45, okay. So, is there anything just in particular you want to say? Our media cards are about to fill up, so.
Okay.
We've got maybe 5 minutes? Yeah. So is there anything in particular you want people to know? About you, about New Orleans, about anything? This is your opportunity.
I think people need to realize New Orleans is here. It's not underwater. This culture or subculture is not going to move to Baton Rouge. If you've ever been to Baton Rouge, you'll understand what I mean there. I mean, it's like the difference between New York City and Albany, but even worse. And they realize they think it's not all Mardi Gras and jazz. There's a huge port here, and that needs to be protected for the economy of the United States. Most of the oil products come through Louisiana, so we're going to be here, and we might as well have fun staying here if it's going to be, if the city's going to exist.
Yeah, I think people are here. I think if you're a new person coming here, you're probably really thrilled about coming here because of all the things we like.
I'm walking in the street with a drink. This is crazy. I couldn't do this in Baltimore.
But I mean, it's tough. You know, it's tough when you have issues that you feel like your city should be able to pay for certain sources, that things that you've had elsewhere. And then if you live here, you're disgusted as well if you've gone through Katrina and you're wondering why it still takes a long time to get stuff done, or you don't feel as safe because, you know, you have a shortage of police and people coming back and maybe just, you know, dysfunctional or things like that. So there's good, but there's bad, but there's, I don't know.
We say that about pretty much any city.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people come here and they like it after the fact, so I guess it's going to keep going. Hopefully it'll get a little bit more on the positive side. Continue more on the positive side.
We'll see.
Right.
Do you guys have any questions? Anything?
Well, I sort of had a question if you wanted to just answer it quickly. So you said that a lot of the wealthier people moved away, and how you lost that, like, you know, economic, like stability, at least in the neighborhoods for taxes. We've also been hearing a lot that a lot of the lower income classes have moved away as well. Like, what really made like the difference for you is like sort of being in the middle, like, you know, for you guys to stay? I mean,
I think we could. We didn't have a kid. We didn't have connections.
Right.
We didn't lose our job. People forget that. Lots of people lost their industry. Whereas the universities, UNO was the first university to just open again in that fall. So we had research money. So we just said, well, let's go get our gear and keep sampling. So we had that freedom. People who had bigger families or from big expensive houses that were destroyed, that's a lot harder to come back, and they probably had the ability to move to a second house or a third house. Poor people, they just didn't have the ability. They didn't have cars. People don't realize, people up north, you know, you think everyone has a car. Well, no, lower middle class people even, you can survive in New Orleans without a car. And if you couldn't evacuate by yourself, you're stuck in some god-awful place in North Louisiana or Texas. And what are you going to do? Honestly, what are you going to do? And that's where they left it. I mean,
I think we kind of figured out what to do or like how to get back. But for some people, if they were going through something else like having kids or health issues or something, and then, you know, either you don't have the means or for some reason you have to, I don't know, you're dealing with something, you're dealing with relatives somewhere else and you have to stay with them or help them. And we just had the means to come back. My family, although I think Liz and I were more of a support for each other than the rest of the family. I mean, I think we just knowing you can kind of come back and that other people have come back helped us, but having the means to do it too.
Yeah.
And the like you said, the job, just knowing that people seem to be rallying, and there was a lot of, okay, well, we're on this surge of let's get it done, let's do it thing.
So it's not so much the actual income we had, it was the freedom based on our jobs, based on the fact that the university didn't shut down, that kind of all came together, and we were the ones who were coming back, had the ability to come back and said, look, we can do it, maybe other people can do it too.
So one last question. Is there a middle class in New Orleans?
There is, and it
I
was
would say
mostly
the
paid
new-
by UNO. Not to promote my own university, but UNO took people from lower incomes, gave them degrees, and they come back. And I always wear my UNO cap. And restaurant owners, people, I said, they all say, "Oh, I went to UNO." I said, "Do you get a good edge?" "Yeah, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that." Because other universities have rich people who go, but we have middle class people, and now our current political leader is trying to get rid of the middle class. And just so there's just rich people and people serving them. I think that's what their goal is.
I guess some of the new people coming in, you'd be having this young group coming in, and I would say mostly young people are at a middle class level, or, you know, at those type of jobs. So yeah, I guess it might be new blood coming in. So yeah, I guess it's gradually coming back.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.